Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day so far and welcome to today's video where I'm going to be sharing all of my thoughts and comparisons on all of these new bronzers that have been raining down on us like cats and dogs for the last few months. So if you're trying to decide which of these is really worth your money, which of these is really going to be the right choice for you and your preferences, then this is the video for you. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so I have five new bronzer formulas that have come out in the last month or so. That is crazy. We have the YSL All Hours bronzer, the RMS Beauty Redimension Hydra bronzer, the Lancome Skin Transforming bronzer, the Armani Luminous Silk bronzer, and I've also decided to include the Chanel Healthy Glow Sunkissed bronzer, as although there are, also highlight and blush in here, these are, designed to be a sort of all over healthy glow bronzer, and you can swirl together and just get a sort of blushing, highlighting bronzer. So I thought this is worth including here. So those are the bronzers that I'm going to compare and share all my thoughts and comparisons between with you guys today. And I've also decided that I'm going to throw in my previous kind of #1 favorite bronzer so that you can kind of see a comparison with the shades and with the finishes of these newer bronzers. And I will let you know how they compare to my previous holy grail, as I think that will also be helpful. So these 5 new bronzers that I'm going to talk about today with you guys fall into kind of 2 categories when it comes to the finish. We have 2 matte bronzers, so the Lancome and the YSL are both a matte finish, and then the RMS and the Armani and the bronzer in the Chanel Compact are all some variation or level of a luminous finish. So that's really going to inform the first step of your decision, because it's very much going to depend whether you want a more matte or a more glowy luminous finish from your bronzer as to where you're going to start among these new ones. So let's take a look at the matte offerings first. So here is the YSL All Hours bronzer. This is the bronzer, incidentally, that I have on my cheeks today in the shade number 2. There are 5 shades to choose from in this bronzer formula, but there isn't a huge variation. The first is very light, and then the next 4 are all quite close together. They're not super spaced out, and there isn't as rich and deep of an option in this range as I would like to see. The packaging is truly spectacular. This will set you back $65 for 7.5 grams of product. So this claims to be a silky, soft bronzer with subtle shimmer in an exclusive couture clutch that leaves your skin with a natural, healthy glow for up to 24 hours. So I agree and disagree with some of these claims. I don't see any shimmer or sheen or glow really from this bronzer at all. I find it to be very, very natural finish. It is super silky. It's very buildable. Mine has already developed a tiny amount of hard pan. I've had this for a good few months now. This, I think, was the first one that launched out of all of these new bronzers, so I've had this quite a long time. And when I bronze, I go to town. I'm there for half an hour, whacking the brush in and out and on my skin and back in the compact. So I don't think that's really necessarily something that is wrong with the powder. I think it just comes with a lot of use of a product, and especially a product that you build up a lot, because the brush is touching your skin and then touching back into the product, and hard pan is quite easily removed. If you're not sure how to do that, get a piece of tape, sellotape here in the UK. I think you guys call it Scotch tape. Is that right? Or is that a different thing? Sellotape, we call it here. Get a piece of sellotape, cut it off and stick it to the back of your hand multiple times so it's only a little sticky, and then stick it onto your product where there's hard pan, give it a little tap, and then it will come right off, okay? Top tip. I love this packaging. It's so luxurious and weighty, and it just feels divine in the hand. I love that it has that sort of soft close feature there and a really nice mirror that stands up by itself. The undertone of this shade in particular is perfect for me. As you can see there, it starts off barely there, especially now that I have a bit of a tan from my holiday. Really subtle shade on me, but builds up really, really nicely. It's such a great bronzer. I think if you have a fairer skin tone, it's very kind of friendly and beginner friendly, and if you're afraid of using bronzer or you're new to bronzer, it's a really forgiving formula. It blends so easily. It is quite lightly pigmented. You easily get as much color as you want, but with some building. So it's very mistake proof, very idiot proof, very buildable, very light, and uber natural. I absolutely love this one. I am a glowy girly, as you guys know, so I do lean towards using glowier cheek products, and I do like a more luminous bronzer, but I absolutely love this one anyway. It's so natural, and when I'm in the mood for something a bit more matte, maybe I'm using a very glowy foundation like I am today, this is just beautiful, uber natural, very easygoing, very easy to use, and just so blurring and soft focus. This is the most natural, I think, of the bunch. So the other more matte bronzer that I have to talk about today is the new Lancome bronzer. So this is available in 5 shades, and I have number 3, and it is definitely lighter than I was expecting it to be. It's not as sheer, it is a bit more like pigmented off the bat in comparison to the YSL. The packaging is almost as gorgeous as the YSL, but it is much lighter and therefore does not feel as luxurious and expensive to me. Still does have a nice stand-up mirror, but the weight difference is significant, and the YSL just feels a much more luxurious experience to use as opposed to the Lancome. This one will set you back £44. It's not available in the US yet, I don't believe, at the point at which I'm making this, but you do get 10 grams. So the price point is probably pretty similar to the YSL, but you get a few extra grams of product. Finish wise, it's quite similar. It's definitely more pigmented off the bat. So if you're looking for something that is going to give you a much more intense color payoff straight away, then you would want to go with the Lancome. If you want something that's kind of more forgiving and lighter and more natural, that takes some building, you would go with the YSL. Here they are close up, so YSL and Lancome. You can see the difference in pigmentation there. The 2 shades that I own, particularly the Lancome, is definitely warmer, and the YSL is a bit more of a neutral undertone. I try to choose the most neutral shade based off of the swatches, which is why I chose shade number 3. I think the rest of the shades that would work for my skin tone seem to be much warmer than I typically prefer. This bronzer is also more loosely pressed, so you definitely get a lot more kick up, and a lot more product will pick up on the brush initially when using this, which is probably why you're getting more pigment, because it's picking up on the brush a lot more product. So this one claims to be a 24-hour serum infused bronzer that delivers instant sun-kissed skin through a fusion of innovation technology and skincare from complexion perfection. Buildable skin fusing matte powder bronzer. So this does just claim to be a matte bronzer, and I would agree it is a pretty standard matte bronzer. I think seeing the 2 together, the YSL definitely looks more natural and the Lancome looks more matte, and that is kind of how I would position them as well. The YSL definitely a sort of more natural matte, no real glow or luminosity, but definitely not a flat matte, whereas the Lancome is a more sort of traditional matte. So between the battle of the mattes, the YSL wins for me. I like that more natural, buildable amount of pigmentation. I find it maybe a hair smoother and just cleaner on the skin. It just is so seamless. The Lancome is a very nice matte bronzer, but because it is, you know, more matte, it is more loosely pressed, you do pick up a lot more product. It's just easier for me to work with the YSL because I am a heavy-handed little lady. Okay, so I would go with the YSL over the Lancome, both though beautiful, more matte finish bronzers. I will show you all of these bronzers that I'm going to talk about today at the end, swatched together side by side on my arm, but for now I'm going to wipe these swatches off so that there's more room for you to see the glowy bronzers closer together and side by side. So we have 3 glowy bronzers to compare and talk about from these newest released bronzers. First up, let's go with the Armani Luminous Silk Bronzer. Really nice, very weighty again packaging. There is the product inside. This will set you back $58 for a whopping 18 grams of product. So by far, this bronzer is going to give you the most bang for your buck, the most product per pound or per dollar. This is a very beautiful glowy bronzer. I have shade 100. This is available in 4 shades, all of which seem just a little warmer than I wish that they were. Here it is on the hand, and I'm sure you can see that luminosity straight off the bat. Now, they do claim that the lightest and the deepest shade of this bronzer are neutral. The light one looks straight up orange to me, so I'm not sure how neutral that one is. And then the deeper shade is also claims to be a neutral bronze tone, which does look more neutral to me, but is going to be too deep for my skin tone. So there wasn't really a neutral option shade wise for this bronzer. I think this would have been like my favorite. If there was a shade available that was kind of comparable to the YSL, I think this would have been my favorite, from the packaging to the amount of product to this embossing to the finish. I love everything about it. It's smooth, it's so pretty, it's got the perfect amount of glow. There's no shimmer or sparkle or glitter, but you just get this beautiful glow or luminosity to the skin. Very understated, so pretty. I love everything about this bronzer. Really nice, huge, big amount. Apparently this was limited edition. That was its initial claim. I don't know why a bronzer would be limited edition, especially when I don't think Armani have like an alternative bronzer. This is like their only range of bronzers. So I'm not sure if that's correct or not. It's not listed everywhere as limited edition, but when it initially launched, I think on Boots here in the UK, it was described as being a limited edition bronzer. So I'm not really sure what to make of that. It is described as per the brand as an ultra creamy bronzing powder infused with caring oils for a smooth application, luminous finish and 24-hour wear. So all of these bronzers claim to be 24-hour wearing. I haven't tested that out. I think the maximum I ever really wear makeup for is like 8 hours, unless something terrible has happened. And they all wear perfectly for that amount of time, but I haven't tried the 24-hour claim. I feel like sort of 16 hours is the most that someone is really going to need like a bronzer on their face. If you're working a double like I used to do back in the days at TGI Fridays, that was kind of the maximum that I'm requiring a bronzer. Nurses, please don't tell me you don't work longer than 16-hour shifts. Please, I beg you. So this has a similar amount of pigment off the bat to the YSL, but it does feel a creamier formula, and it obviously has a very different finish and also undertone to the Lancome and the YSL. This is by far more glowy. You'll be able to see at the end when I swatch them all side by side, but it has quite a bit of pigment. It doesn't have any sort of kick up or powderiness to the formula. It very much feels like a gelée hybrid type of formula. Beautiful. Wish the shade was not quite so warm for my personal preference. So next up we have the RMS Redimension Hydra bronzers, and these are available in 4 shades. I have the third of 4, which is Tan Lines, and these will set you back $35 for 6.5 grams. So this is the lowest price point, but it also is the smallest fill amount. Just like the blushes and the highlighters from RMS, these are refillable, so you can pop the bronzer out and then just buy the refill and save yourself a few pounds when you repurchase it. I absolutely love this shade. I have several of the RMS bronzers. I was gifted a few, but this one I purchased myself, and you can just see the difference in tone there and why I ended up preferring the RMS to the Armani. The packaging is far less luxurious, lighter, and just does not feel as luxurious or look as luxurious and beautiful in person. It's much lighter and smaller in comparison to the Armani, but the shade is really what matters when it comes to bronzer. Nice luxury packaging tickles my pickle. I like it. It gives me pleasure to pick it up and use it and feel it in my pore while I'm applying it, but it doesn't make up for a shade being off or a product just not being as good. These two, as far as the product and the bronzer, are almost identical. The finish is very, very similar. The amount of pigment, very, very similar. The application process, the RMS, just like the Armani, there's no kick up, there's no powderiness. It feels like a gel powder hybrid. It's very, very smooth, and it has a really lovely amount of pigment right off the bat. And that gorgeous, again, beautiful luminous finish without sparkle or shimmer, keeping your skin airbrushed and very, very smooth and flattering, very easy to blend, very easy to build. But this shade is just so much better for me, much more neutral than the Armani. So for that reason, I personally prefer the RMS to the Armani, even though they are otherwise very, very similar, and you get so much more product with the Armani and so much more luxurious packaging. The RMS, the shade just gazumps the Armani off the desk. And so finally, let's talk about the bronzer in these new Healthy Glow Sunkissed powders from Chanel. This is my favorite. This is the medium coral. Absolutely gorgeous, classic Chanel packaging. And while we only have the total weight for this entire compact, which is 15 grams, that would mean that the bronzer is probably around 5 grams. And when used just the bronzer in this compact, it kind of falls right in the middle of the luminous and the matte category. So it's definitely got some luminosity compared to the YSL or the Lancome, but when you swatch it next to the RMS and the Armani, it's nowhere near as glowy. It's more of like a satin, whereas the Armani and the RMS are very glowy. This shade also has that more red undertone, so it's not sort of orangey and overly warm, but it also isn't a neutral shade either. It's that sort of reddish bronzer, which I love because that is kind of the tone that my skin tone takes on as a natural tan, which is what I'm trying to mimic when I'm using bronzer. So here they are close up. We have the Armani, the RMS, and the Chanel, and I think you'll be able to see there the finish difference. These two very similar, beautifully glowy, and the Chanel definitely significantly less luminosity to the finish, but still not entirely matte. You can probably also notice that the Armani has like some gold like flecks or reflex in there as well, which is adding to the warmth of the shade. So speaking just about the bronzers, my favorite from the luminous category is definitely the RMS. I love both of these, but the shade of the RMS is just that much better, and I just don't think there's a neutral tone shade that would work better for me in the Armani that is available. So the RMS is my overall winner. Now let's talk about the Gucci, which was my previous favorite. As far as formula wise, this more closely resembles the Lancome. Definitely a much more sort of powdery, looser pressed feeling. There's no sort of creaminess to the powder. It's just very much a sort of standard powder, and an absolutely perfectly neutral shade, very pigmented. Need to go quite careful with this one, which is why I ultimately ended up preferring the RMS over the Gucci, because it's just so much more forgiving as far as being heavy-handed in the application process. You know, the Gucci, with it being that looser pressed powder, really easy to pick a lot up on a brush and then have a bit of work to do when it comes to blending, and then, you know, it traveling too far from the area you want it applied in. Very pigmented, even though this is shade number 2. It's only the second shade in the range, and it's this pigmented with that's just one swipe, and it's this pigmented. Finish wise, it kind of sits alongside, I would say, the Chanel bronzer. So both the RMS and the Armani are much glowier in finish than the Gucci is. So again, that's kind of points towards them. So I think for me, my two favorites, just talking about the standalone bronzer, so the standalone bronzer from the Chanel, not including the blush and the highlight that are in there, my two favorites from this whole bunch are the YSL and the RMS. These are the two that I feel like I will use the most because the shade is just perfect. They have forgiving, buildable formulas, and if I'm in the mood for something a bit more natural, a bit more matte leaning, it's the YSL. If I want something glowier, it's the RMS. These are the pick of the bunch for me. Just depends which finish you would prefer. Okay, so I'm going to swatch everything together now so that you can kind of see all of the tones, shades and finishes all in a nice little row. So first up we have the Lancome. then the YSL, then the Chanel, then we have the Armani, the RMS, and finally the Gucci. So again, we have the Lancome shade 3, YSL shade 2, the Chanel medium coral palette, Armani shade 100, RMS shade tan lines, and the Gucci shade 2. Okay, so there you have it. Those are all of my thoughts on these new bronzers and comparisons for you. I really hope this is going to help you if you're trying to choose which one might be best for you, which one you want to pick up next or first, and which one most suits your preferences and just what you're looking for from a bronzer. Please let me know if you've tried any of these, which is your favorite, which one you're most drawn to, which one tickles your pickle the most in the comment section down below. But I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, and I would love to see you in the next one. Otherwise, take care for now. Bye 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 bye.